Hello and welcome to the Behind the Blockchain podcast. Today I'm joined by Marouen Zelleg, founder at Crestal. Marouen, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Jack, for having me. I'm good. I'm calling from Singapore today, and I'm very happy to be chatting with you.
Nice. Well, yeah, thanks for joining me. So, Marouen, for people who don't know who you are, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So this is Marouen. I am originally from North Africa, Tunisia. Grew up there, studied in France. Then I got an engineering degree, master's degree, that I've used to start working. And then I had a couple of experiences across multiple countries. I worked a little bit in the US and in Singapore. And in Singapore, since actually kind of like a hub here, I got the chance to really cover different markets into Southeast Asia and APAC in general. Um, Generally worked like in technical software sales, business, kind of like a business solutions, enterprise SaaS, etc. And then most recently, the last couple of years, I've transitioned into a blockchain specific domain. And yeah, today I'm actually a founder of a blockchain company called Crestal.
That's cool. So you've worked at some pretty prestigious organisations in the past. Could you talk us through the steps in your career journey that have led you to this point so far?
Mm. I think it's usually actually what you don't see. It's like the grind behind the results. And so, obviously, when you graduate with a degree and you're like early on, there was always a choice to go through standard and safe paths versus taking a few risks. So, for example, in my school, engineering school that I graduated from in France, most of my classmates, what they end up doing, they just go and join as a junior consultant at Deloitte or Accenture in Paris, and then they, grind for years to get a bit through the ranks. I did the interviews for those, but it didn't appeal to me, and so I was looking for something different. And that's when I reached out to the alumni. There was a gentleman, Ismail. He had a startup in Palo Alto in the Silicon Valley. Small team of like 10, limited runway, and he was willing to take a chance on me. So I took a chance, of course, on that career, and that ended up to be the most interesting choice. So they, being in the Silicon Valley, of course, there is a lot of culture that you absorb from a startup builder, etc. I remember there was a frozen yogurt place downstairs. This was back in 2009, and it was just up and coming, the froyo craze. And Steve Jobs would come there and get his yogurt actually every day at 4 p.m. And so we would all come down from the office and then just try to speak to him. He didn't speak to anybody. And so, these slightly different environments that I'm fairly certain they were more interesting than working in a big consulting firm in Paris. Then even with that company, could have stayed there, but then that one day they said, we are opening an office in APAC. Would you want to be part of the 3 people who want to go and explore? I remember when they mentioned Singapore, I had to pause for a bit and then Google it. What is Singapore? And I saw a few pictures and I said, well, I think I can survive there. So obviously, like went there, and then it opens few other alternatives. And so by doing that work, actually through the journey and even in the role itself, like at first I was what you would call a solution architect. So it's like a pre-sales consultant. You would go with the salespeople and explain the solution and do demos and try to convince. Most people actually get comfortable in that role as well, and they stay for a long time. But then I was lucky enough to join a company called OutSystems. They do like a low code, no code solution. And they had a really good product. So it helped me to really gain a lot of confidence when I go and pitch this product and speak about it. Until one day I said, well, how about I switch to a full sales role? Because that's a bit more risky. You have like reduced guaranteed salary, but then you have more commissions, etc. So again, taking risks, like really trying to get out of the mold. Um, and then already in that company in its own right, it was kind of a very successful company in the enterprise SaaS software. And so switching from that domain to blockchain was another risk to take. And so I remember we were doing a project in Brunei with the government for decentralized ID. And then my Web2 company was doing the mobile and web layer, and then ConsenSys was doing the blockchain layer. And obviously, I've been curious about blockchain and participating a bit before. And so when I saw that project through, I had to make the jump as the deal was won, and ping the team at ConsenSys says, "Can I come over?" Right. So yeah, again, a bit of luck, a bit of boldness, and that opens doors. So that's definitely my recommendation.
That's cool. And going back to the very start of your career, why sales? Why business development? What was the attraction there?
It was about solving problems, and then you can solve them purely by coding on a computer. But then there was an element of a human factor to it, and that's what attracted me to taking customer facing roles. Like you're really speaking to people, trying to understand what they're trying to achieve rather than looking at specs or taking a theoretical idea and trying to implement it, which, hardcore developers would be very good at. And so being actually interacting with clients directly has always been enjoyable. It works quite well to be a good salesperson. But again, as I said, in a sales role, you really, at the end of the day, you have an ultimate goal, which is to get their money and give them your product. Um, Business development gives you more tools that you can do a bit more, and then you can try to find different win-win action items, etc. And so it's a natural progression for me. It was like my initial problem-solving desire, then wanting to solve problems by interacting with people rather than actually with systems and machine only. And then obviously expanding the solution space by not making it only transactional about monetary value, but more about growth metrics and validation of ideas and expansion, etc. And that's what brought us finally to the business development side.
Yeah, for sure. And was there somewhere that you went to learn those skills, to learn how to solve problems, to learn to be a business developer, to learn how to create those kind of win-win solutions? Was it something you kind of picked up over time? How did that go?
So there is a class you pay for $10,000 per month, and they teach you everything you need. No, generally, actually, it's a combination of
Cool.
a combination of things. Um, so I think the problem solving aspect is one thing. This is gonna sound very boring, but it is very true. It's like looking at a particular problem and having a desire to solve it, being able to take a step back and looking at it from a wider angle to see different ways of solving it. The ability to communicate is like a key thing, right? So you cannot solve a problem by yourself. You might have the perfect solution, but to implement it, you need to bring people on board. So being convincing, being a bit more charismatic, I would say, with either that's teammates or clients, being a trusted advisor. There is a set of hard skills as well. Like nobody wants to interact with somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. So if I am selling you a tech solution, I better understand what it does and understand technology and understand your problems. So it's part of like the empathy comes with understanding as well. So it's not purely soft skills. I think like generally actually public presentation skills are very important as well. Like I remember pre-COVID, we used to do a lot of go to the office and shake some hands and projector and wear your suit. Obviously, after that with COVID, it transferred a lot to Zoom calls. I did, for example, have a friend who was doing trainings of public speaking, and I spent a few hours with her reviewing, very simple stuff. She asks you to record yourself, and then you go and review how you do it, and so on. And then some of the tricks and tips were very post-COVID. So I was like, hey, this screen is a square, and you should probably use this section to formalize the idea number one, and then transition to them. So these small things that are very different from the in-room presentation. This also refers to the fact that you have to always keep updating your skills. So I've met a lot of salespeople, a lot of business development people, especially in the enterprise software, who have been selling the same thing for 20 years, and they believe they're very good at it, but actually what happens is that they have a very good network. So they just, they have people who will always buy from them, but then they see an up and coming technology or they see an up and coming company and they want to join it because they believe they're really good. They struggle because they have not been really updating their skill. They have not been open to learning new methods and new things. So that's also like kind of a characteristic that we'll go through.
For sure. And also, just on that, the people you're selling to change over that time as well. Different cultural
Oh
differences
man,
between
yeah.
generations and this kind of stuff. Like it gets, if you don't really take time to understand and learn who you're selling to and everything, it can get quite tricky, I suppose, if you're trying to do it the old way and people don't like maybe the hardcore sales cold calling approach anymore. They prefer that more kind of softly insight kind of learning teaching approach. It can be quite
Yeah,
difficult.
yeah, absolutely. So I remember like when I was this was back in 2016 or so. Like I was responsible for a new market that I took over, which was Malaysia. And in Malaysia, there is Like there's a lot of big companies, but one of the biggest companies is Petronas, where I don't know if you watch Formula One, they have the
I don't.
cars. You don't? Okay. I think it's the Mercedes
No, I don't.
Petronas. I'm not sure. So Petronas is a big oil and gas company, and everybody wants to sell to it. And it was so hard actually to connect with the leadership there. These are like old people. They've been there for years, very secure in their job. So like the ability to disrupt them and get something happening is very tricky. I remember I tried so many things. I've even like filmed myself videos, pitching them with a whiteboard behind. I was getting introductions, and to be completely honest, it was hard to know who they are, like to know what they wanted, because they are such an inaccessible people, both from a maybe generation point of view, but also from the way they work. So like in Web3, for example, and blockchain is very different. These are different personas that you're interacting with, you're trying to collaborate with. Like as an ecosystem, it's very open and accessible. Like you can talk to amazing founders, just like on the side of a conference, and they will be, open to share their ideas and so on. You can connect with them. So, being able to know who you're selling to or who you're partnering with is kind of a hack. And there is not an easy way in the traditional ways. Like if I was selling, I don't know, Salesforce software again, selling to government agencies and so on, it's a hassle. Like it's very difficult. But then, lucky, for example, in new industries, whether it's AI or blockchain, it's a newer generation, it's different breed of decision makers and players in the game. So you can really relate. At least from my side, I can relate better. But then I'm becoming a little bit older, so the newer generation could be something else. So that's why I'm always trying to keep up to date with what's hot and cooking.
And have you noticed much of a difference from moving from Web 2 into Web 3? Have you noticed a difference in the way that founders like to be approached, like to be sold to, that kind of stuff?
Hmm. Hmm. I think the biggest difference is, and I know this is very specific to Web 2 enterprise SaaS software, because in many of actually the major software providers, their real target market is small, called small to medium, but they don't really target small companies. Like they struggle to sell to startups. For instance, we used to have like this product that allows you to build your very robust mobile application within like 6 weeks. You have like a consumer ready mobile application with two developers. When startup founders see that, they just like go, I really want to use this. It can really shortcut my search for product market fit. But it's just like from a business model, from a contracting perspective, from a pricing, it was not ready to work with them. And so you end up being forced to target only the large enterprise, where every decision is like 5 decision takers. You have process, you have RFPs, you have these complex things that justifies a bigger spend. Whereas in Web3, it's very startup heavy ecosystem. And so even actually the most successful projects for the longest time, they are usually just a team of 20, 30 max. If you're trying to, for example, get a partnership on the infrastructure level or on the wallet level, these are typically 1 or 2 decision makers that you just have to be how to say, aligned to their goals. So it makes the sales process much simpler. And so, like an enterprise or Web 2 world, let's say, you always actually have. There was a line that I go by. There is usually a 3.5 decision makers in a deal. So if you are only talking to 3, there is somewhere else somebody who can screw up your deal at the end of the day. Whereas
I
in
like that.
Web 3, it's such a flatter ecosystem in a way from a decision making and kind of alignment point of view. So it makes it a bit easier to interact and to reach consensus. Not to
Yeah,
say
for
that it
sure.
will not change, of course, after a couple of years as you know the space grows and you have more complex ecosystems now.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely noticed a difference. Um, I've been recruiting into Web 3 for a few years now, but prior
Mm-hmm.
to that, I was kind of strictly Web 2, and I've noticed that in Web 2, I found it was very much cold calling and trying to kind of put my services in front of people that way. A lot of cold calling, a lot of emailing, this kind of thing. Whereas in Web 3, I find it's a lot more personable. I feel in the way that everyone is on Telegram. You can get access to someone fairly quickly through that. But if you start to if you start to try and approach them and really try and sell your services, I've
Mm.
noticed a lot of people get really turned off by that and really dislike it.
It's also that
You
nobody
kind
has
of don't
money
have
to
to
spend in
change.
Web2. Nobody has money to pay for anything, so it's more of like a barter system, you know. You give
Yeah,
me your service, I give you your service.
yeah, 100%. It's yeah, it was a tricky thing to to get used to. I guess you kind of have to completely switch up the way that you've always done things to, again, as you said before, kind of keep learning and reinvent yourself a little bit to make sure that you're approaching your market in the right way. Um, so I'm sure a lot of people want to know, what's it like working at such an influential company like ConsenSys in Web3?
It's I wouldn't have chosen a different place to start really the Web3 journey, to be honest. Like
Okay, why is that?
it has this property or feel of school in a way. You know, it's a university.
Okay,
It's like there is a lot of things that the outside world does not see. Like for example, people know consensus about their product, MetaMask, Infura, Quorum, etc., and believe that that's all we do. But there is actually a lot of teams internally that are really researching interesting topics. So remember, we had like weekly DAO days or monthly, was it monthly? Monthly DAO days where you have a dedicated day a month to go and learn about DAOs and participate in DAOs and form DAOs. It was not related to any particular business line or any particular product that we were kind of selling. It's just a thing that we do. There were sessions about tokenomics, treasury management, and how to do that. It was not a product that we sell either as well. So there was a lot actually internal learning that was happening. And so what ends up happening with such initiatives is that there is a lot of ideations that come from within the teams. And so a lot of products will pop up, which is like, hey, this is new idea or this is new MVP that we want to go and do business development for to validate into the market and see if there is a fit for it or not. Some of these products spin into their own company. Some obviously get sunsetted after a while. And so although actually there was some solutions that had clients and there was revenue coming in. As an organization, it was a very unique blend of that learning, experimentation, research, testing out a few ideas in market or even internally. And then, yeah, at the same time, it's also like such a big company. Like at the time I was there, it was 600 or 800 people. And so there is so many different
big.
characters. Each one has their particular skill that knows about something that would be completely mind blowing for you if you go and speak to them and learn about it. So yeah, it was a really good, I think, space to get started in. That gives you that pluridisciplinary expertise in space. Like you're not just doing DeFi or a DEX or a wallet. It's just like a bit of everything.
Yeah, I guess that really then helps you to narrow down what you find most exciting, what you're best at within the space. Like there's certain things that you really problems that you really want to focus on. Sounds like a great place to be, brilliant place to learn. You know, they give you those days to get stuck into that I suppose you
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
get
mean,
at a smaller company because you're so focused on trying to build things, right?
yeah, and I think it just actually creates kind of a good interaction between the different team members as well. So you easily become closer to certain people. So if you need to ask for help or so on, you have a reason rather than actually just pinging somebody out of the blue, trying to get them out of the bubble to get help about a particular item. So I think that's quite valuable as a space. Um, some people might say it's not very efficient, which may or may not be the case. Actually, I might agree a little bit with that. The fact that you have this kind of structure, uh, but then at least as an employee, as a team member, it was very positive and fortunate for me to be actually in that space.
Yeah, definitely. And then you left Consensus and moved to Polygon, right? And had a stint at Polygon after that. Did you
Yeah.
notice many differences?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why I left actually, I wanted to try a focused project, right? So because having those different products and different teams within consensus, it was great, but I wanted to see a particular focus. I remember at that point I was looking at joining, for example, a DEX team or there was a particular actually chain ecosystem that I started talking to. And in my head, it was kind of it felt like a one dimension. I know this is oversimplifying, but it's a one-dimensional problem to solve. It's just like, we have a chain, we have to increase the transaction volume on it, or we have a DEX, we have to increase a TVL, versus slightly more fluid, multidimensional things to solve at ConsenSys. And so Polygon obviously came up as a great opportunity. At that point, they not only have the POS that was very, of course, successful, still is, but then also they were starting to roll out the ZK technologies as different products. And so on my first, I think on my first week or so, the Polygon 2.0 vision was declared with Polygon CDK, a set of products that is leveraging the ZK to go to market and create these roll-up stacks. So it really felt like it's one ship going into one direction, which is like the whole company was going to that direction, and that was very different from ConsenSys, where you had multiple teams, multiple experimentations. So that particular focus was obviously good to work within, and then have some, defining the goals was very straightforward in a way. It's like, okay, for this to work, we have to achieve A, B, C, D. Now, making that happen, that's a different story. But at least from that kind of focus of where the company is going was very good. The other thing as well is that I think a lot of like for me at least in ConsenSys, for the 2 years I spent there, it was a transition between sales and BD, which I spoke about earlier. Like the difference between sales and BD is two different things. And there was a growth journey there of moving from selling software to doing business development. But I kind of felt like there is more to it to do BD. Like I felt I had a good formula, but there was a bit more to it. And then the one thing that was pinging in the back of my head is like Polygon has a lot of BD, Web3 BD experience, and there is a thing to learn there. And indeed, actually going to join the team and seeing the internal processes, the decision making, the different metrics on which you measure a deal, whether it's worth it or not, the partnerships that you select to pursue. It was a lot of unique insights into how a Web3 business development super organization operates. And you can see today, actually, a lot of the BD leads from Polygon are, they scattered and they're just leading their own chains, their own projects, or, that culture has spread a little bit. So that was a very unique and different aspect between, let's say, Polygon and ConsenSys.
And obviously now you've launched your own project, leading your own project, Crestal. Did you always know you wanted to be a founder? Was that the plan?
I always knew I wanted to be an inventor, which is a different thing, right?
Okay.
As a kid, I was always coming up with these invention ideas, and then obviously what you learn as an adult is that the difference between an invention and a reality is a founder, is a company, is an execution, right? Take that idea to execution. And so obviously it was a natural progression to say, well, listen, if I want to really leave something into this world as an attempt to solve either a big problem or a very particular niche problem, then it's not just about writing an article about it or speaking about it in a bar, but really going and taking the plunge and trying to execute it. And obviously, I think, as you can imagine, there is so much more between actually that first idea day to getting sustainable, business out of it. And that's what the journey we are going through at Crestal at this moment.
That's cool. And could you introduce us to Crestal in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So I think one of the things that I saw through my career is that there was a lot of actually, how to say, software services, software solutions being sold left and right, and then there is always actually somebody who's wondering what's the best combination of services for my particular use case, and you have 100 other experts or companies coming around and trying to pitch it or sell it, etc. And then what happened in the Web 2 world, and to a certain extent still happens in Web 3 today, is that all of these actually selling processes are still very non-measurable. So it's like, I pitch you, I give you a bit of discount, I promise you certain things, and then you may or may not get them. It may or may not work for you. And so what we wanted to create is really a place where certain type of services, and in particular, in this case, modular infrastructure services for the blockchain. So for example, storage or indexing or compute or any other type of unit of blockchain service can be actually in a way sold or distributed through Crestal, and then it will be paid for by measurable performance. So the idea here is that if you are a project builder and you want to have some sort of infrastructure expertise or infrastructure tools that you want to use for your project, you would come to Crestal, you would describe what you want, and then you have these different expert teams and service providers that will propose to you that they say, listen, with this combination of services, you will achieve goals such as maybe cost or speed or security, etc. So there will be measurable promises. We call them performance benchmarks. And we try to build an ecosystem where if I choose your solution, I will pay for it, or I'll pay you as long as it's meeting those performance benchmarks. And so in a way, you keep incentivized to maintain good services, to maintain and update good quality of software or whatever modular services you're giving me. And for me, I don't have to overcommit at the beginning, but rather I'm rewarding you for your performance achievements, essentially. So that's where we're building this kind of like a marketplace where anybody can come and describe what they want. They can get proposals. There is a binding smart contract between the two parties, and then we have a network that validates that the performance is being met. So we're calling it a proof of performance. As long as these services are meeting the performance, then the business transaction is executing between the provider and the receiver of the business.
I really like that. It kind of guarantees a real guarantees that the builders are receiving a certain level of value out of that, and kind of creates a win-win between everyone, right? Like keeps the quality of service high, make sure the projects are getting value out of it. Yeah, I really
Yeah, I
like it.
think it's very good, especially in a world where like you have the expertise distributed around the world, and you may not know people that may be the best fit for you. And so there is a lot of actually these kind of let's say called Upwork. I don't know if it is a platform for you. You can get some services from freelancers.
Yeah,
We're not pushing it to that level. We're really focusing on things that are measurable, things that are easily quantifiable. Like you wouldn't, for
yeah,
example, get a UI design on Crestal. You wouldn't get a blog written for you on Crestal, but you would get a software service that is measurable when it comes to its performance, its liveliness, its cost, etc. And then you would not need necessarily to trust the person or make any assumption on their quality of work, but rather reward them as long as they keep performing.
yeah. I like that. I suppose as well that gives the opportunity for some smaller players to be able to compete with some of the bigger players in the market as well. Because if they can showcase that they can, keep the performance the same, but they may be slightly on the cheaper side of things, well, maybe it gives
I
them an
think,
opportunity
yeah,
to take some market share.
yeah, what we were betting on, Jack, is the specialization, right? So if I am a big provider of certain RPC or storage and whatnot, I am pursuing scale and pursuing large distribution. So what happens, I usually try to optimize my offering and I try to standardize it. So it becomes easier for me to maintain and it gets more customers out there. And so the margins become bigger. And so what this ends up happening what ends up happening is that a particular project can have some specific needs, and then these big providers will not even be able to meet them because I cannot customize my software for you.
They can't be flexible
And
on it.
so exactly, yeah. And so having actually these kind of intel coming into Crestal marketplace, and then having enough maybe more flexible, smaller players who will be willing to take on that customization and consolidate. So maybe actually there is 10 projects who want the same customization. So it helps us also discover new use cases or new customization. So yeah, this is kind of the bet as well. So it would be hopefully a mix between big solution providers, but also more flexible, smaller solution provider. And the optimization is not only on costs, not necessarily only cheaper solutions, but maybe specific use case fits or other metrics that are more important for me as a builder than cost. And I'll be able to
Yeah,
find my match on Crestal.
that sounds cool. How far into the journey are you?
So we started a few months ago. We have managed to raise our pre-seed round, which gives us a bit of funds to build our MVP testnet. And so we are working on a few pieces of the puzzle. The very first piece that hopefully by the time you are listening to this podcast will be up and available is kind of a dashboard that allows you to see different performance metrics of some popular services in blockchain today, some popular modular services. So in particular, data availability, there's a few providers in the space. And so you'll be able to go and see how they compare on different metrics, on different attributes, and then from there decide perhaps what works best for you. And then the second piece that is coming up as well is more of a guidance. And so you would come and have that first interaction of saying, I'm building XYZ. What do you think is the best formula for me? And then you will get advices coming back to you. Hopefully this will be up and running in like the earlier part of this year, and then later in the year you will be able to deploy these services. So for example, it's not only about getting the advice, but getting it running and then paying for it. It's an interesting journey, building the team, of course, building the product, trying to validate certain ideas without overspending on them from a product market fit. I would say we're still very early days, but it's a very exciting early days.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I'll be keeping a close eye over the next few months
Absolutely.
and beyond. Sounds great. So obviously now you've obviously been a founder for a few months now. Is there anything that really surprised you that you necessarily weren't expecting, like any particular challenges or anything that you needed to learn and fast that you weren't expecting?
I think there is a few things, like some I suspected, but it's not the same. So, for example, like building team culture in distributed remote workplace. That's one thing that obviously I worked on before. In Polygon, in particular, I had a team of about like 5 or 6 people, and so that was a bit of a important aspect of the day-to-day job. But then also, like all of these 6 people, they were doing kind of the same thing. They were all business development. So there is a lot of actually common points of interest that you can build this culture around it. They will all enjoy the same memes, for example. Whereas with Crestal, you're building kind of a diverse team that is developers, that is marketing people, that is business development people, different profiles. And so I'm a co-founder on this project with Eric. You're expected to kind of like try to slowly establish some sort of company culture, which is very different from team culture. Right? And so this is something that I'm discovering through, and trying to come up with, of course, the right approach. There's no right approach, but figure out along the way. Lucky enough, we are still small, but then as the team members numbers grow, that will be a different story. The other aspect is obviously running a business as a business owner versus an employee is very different. And so, having to take these decisions about expenses and spends and planning the runway, and realizing that at first you don't get money from, obviously not from a salary, but you don't get money from deals. Like there is no product to sell. You're getting money from investors. You're getting, you're saving on money from partnerships and collaborations. And so it requires a lot of creativity into how to solve for this like runway dilemma, which is like you want to go fast, but not too fast, that if you're going in the wrong direction, you might not have enough runway to turn around. So balancing those things are quite interesting. The other, and probably the most important one, is the amount of respect that I have for different functions within the company now. Because I always like when I work for organizations, whether big or small, you have your colleagues who are doing marketing, content, community management, all of these parallel departments to what you're doing, but it's not your job. And usually you just like can see what they're doing and you have your opinion about it. But then obviously with a startup, you are the one doing all of these. So all of these functions, I can't just go and, let's say, hire a community management manager right away, but I have to probably do it for a couple of months myself to get it up and running, and then figure out what are the things. Obviously speak to a couple of experts, get their opinion, get some advice, but then soon enough try to hand over to somebody who knows what they're doing. And so doing that, initiation for a couple of months on each one of these functions really opens your eyes to the difficulties of all these roles. Like I wouldn't say there is an easy job in a software company. Like all jobs are very, very technical. There is actually depth to it. There is a lot of science behind it. And so you really appreciate what makes successful companies successful when you have all these departments happening at their executing at their highest performance with, of course, the right people. I believe that would be the hardest thing for a company to be successful. If you can have the right individuals in each one of these verticals that all come together to make you like a recognizable brand, a good product, a desirable solution for your customers.
Yeah, for sure. You take those things for granted when you work for a larger company.
Yeah, it's just like,
Um,
it's either happening or not happening, whereas actually there is a lot of complexities to it. Like I'll tell you a funny story. Like we were event organization, right? So we have ECC coming up. We wanted to do a small gathering for our community, and so we went and looked at a couple of bars. We wanted to rent one and negotiate the food and the drinks and the number of people. We thought we had it all figured out. Um, and then because we were doing 100 other things, there was a small detail that escaped that actually this is a chain. And the one we were finalizing was in Berlin, Germany, whereas ECC is in Belgium, Brussels. So we almost actually finalized. And so obviously, this is actually so many small things that can make something go wrong, right? And so there is a lot of course,
mm,
responsibility for each one of these departments head. If I am an event manager, if I am a I don't know content creator, or if I am a marketing person, there is so many fine details and small things that seem trivial, but I can imagine that somebody is overburned or like hassled by their managers or bosses can be stressed into skipping them and can ruin the whole thing. And so it really requires a lot of focus to execute at the highest performance for every one of these departments.
and how do you know what to focus on? Because I think back to when I before I started working for myself, and obviously launched Unveil a couple of years ago. Before that, I worked for a very large recruitment company, and then worked for a smaller startup. But still, all of our back office functions were taken care of. All of our systems were taken care of. The IT just worked. All our systems just worked. We just had to turn up, build relationships, do the day job. Find great people, introduce them to great companies, and that was what we were doing. 10, 12 hours a day. When I launched
Yeah,
Unveil, I then day one, I think, right. Oh no, wait, I haven't got a CRM. Okay, so I need to go and find a CRM. Oh wait, I haven't got a LinkedIn recruiter license. Okay, fine. So I need to get in touch with LinkedIn, get an account manager there, then set up that up. I need a calling system. Right, I haven't done that yet. I need an accountant. Um, all this stuff. I need to set up my emails, and I need to do all the spam filters on my emails and all this kind of stuff. And and then you think, right, well, actually, no. Now I need to market, and I need to work out a marketing strategy. How are people going to know about me? And then before you know it, you've spent hours and hours and hours doing everything that isn't necessarily revenue generating just to be able to set yourself up and get in front of the right people.
yeah,
Um, it's quite hard to prioritize it. And when you first start, it's fun to do all these things, but it kind of takes you away from having the focus on right what actually is going to make the business revenue. That's what I need to focus most of my time on. But you still need to do bits of the other things as well, right? It's hard
yeah.
balance.
It's very tough. I mean, you described it perfectly, right? So there is so many things to be done. So I think what we've been doing so far, we'll see if it's the right approach or not. First of all, is actually speaking to as many people as possible. So acknowledge that there is a lot of expertise out there of people who've done things, they know it much better than you. And so obviously be very very specific about your questions. Don't waste their time. But most people actually are helpful. So you would I would speak to you and you describe how recruiting happens, right? How it goes. And so try to create a rough idea about how something works, first of all. Then the other very important decision to take is actually delegate versus do yourself. And so certain things that you can spend 3 days to learn and you'll be shit at it, and then you should not probably do that thing. That thing delegate it right away. Some other stuff that okay, takes you maybe 1 hour of research, but then you can somehow figure it out for a bit. So that first decision, and looking within your team. So especially if you are two co-founders or three co-founders, look at what you are good at, what your co-founders look at, and then okay, now we need a third person that can do this thing that none of us is good at, or it's not worth our time. So that's the other thing. And then the last bit, which is really the complex part, being able to visualize kind of a multi-dial system whereby all of them are actually related in a way. And so you'll be able to push one dial to a certain point that you should not push it anymore because there's other parts that depend on it, right? So for example, you want to do so you want to write content. You want to write content and you want to create some content about your project, but then you do not have a good distribution place for content. You're using Medium. That's not the most efficient part. You should have your own blog in the website. And so perhaps don't write too much content until you have your own blog on the website where the content directs back to your website. Then you have this content written, but then you don't have an SEO strategy. And so you're writing all this content and you haven't figured out what's your SEO strategy. Maybe you'll get an SEO strategist later on and they will say, well, these are the keywords, or these are the links you have to put in your article, and now you have to go back and rewrite all of your content. So this is just really within a simple item, which is content, blog, SEO. But expand that further, which is, okay, now I have product development going on. I have maybe a good employee that I want to hire for something, but then they would have nothing to work on for a bit until that other thing is ready. And so, yeah, this is really the hardest part, which is being able to visualize as much as possible your business as a complex board, and different things you have to move up or move ahead, but then also don't force something when it depends on something else that has not moved. So there's a lot of context switching. There is a lot of distractions, to be honest, like you're doing one thing and then switching to the other one, 20 tabs open. I have a whiteboard here, always staring at it. It's like, okay, that and that and that. And yeah, hopefully all goes to, of course, you have to have your master plan, right? So as these things move, am I moving towards my master plan? Is my master plan still valid? Maybe that needs to be revised as well. So yeah, I didn't give you an answer, but I described the situation. And then when you go to bed at night, you then stress about revenue, because then you're like, oh, whatever I did today did not get me any closer to making revenue, but in fact it does, actually, little by little, and it will get you there.
Absolutely. Do you think everyone can be a founder?
I don't know. It's of course, it's even like a personal question. Like, do I have what it takes to be a founder? And I don't think actually kind of easy to answer that. It's a journey you have to jump on. And some of us actually will, crack it right away first time. Some will fail and give up. Some will want to try it again. There is serial founders. There is actually people who did not even continue with their first kind of venture. So I think depending on what you're founding, yes, everybody can be a founder. Because now we think a lot about in terms of software, technology, and even actually specific crypto. But founder is really founder everything. Like, you probably founded a home, or you founded kind of a bakery shop, or you founded a department within your company. And so the scope of it is actually matters as well. Like, I think, can anybody be NVIDIA founder? Maybe not, right? That's a very specific use case. But then if you really have the desire to go and build something and leave kind of a mark on your domain or on the world, if it's a bigger mark, then yeah, there is usually there is a formula in which anybody can be a successful founder. Just really not to overstretch, or maybe to recognize what you're good at and what you're not good at. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Can anybody be a crypto founder? Probably not. Can anybody
So
be a founder?
I
Then
always
yes.
wonder. Yeah, I always wonder about that. Everybody can, but should everybody? I think is the thing, right? Like, can versus should.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just finding it quite an interesting question to understand people's points of view on, really.
Yeah, I think actually one of the other, like, one earlier points, I also discovered the difference between kind of a startup founder and a business founder, right? So you can, if you really enjoy building something, creating a restaurant or a bakery is an equally challenging, kind of a situation, which is, you're not going to be a 100x company, but it's just about breaking even and making profit margins. So obviously in tech, we don't like that. Like, in tech, we want companies to be 100x, 1000x valuations of whatever they're spending. But generally speaking, like, yeah, as a founder, the first step, whether you want to jump in it or not, is just realizing, like, what kind of thing can I found, right? Am I founding something for massive revenue? I'm founding something like a public good. Am I founding a charity? Am I founding a business where just my expenses have to be slightly lower than my revenue? And then many people don't want to do that, which is absolutely fine. Like, people do enjoy to work for a company, to have, I don't know if you've seen those TikTok videos about like a day in the life of product manager in Google, going to the gym in the morning and having the latte. And that's a very good life. It's a very nice life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to believe, I don't want to remember how much salary I left behind to be able to do this. So it's like, if you
We
like being
won't
able
talk
to,
about it.
yeah, if you want to start, spend money and travel and enjoy and have 30 days of holiday a year, then founder is definitely not for you. So there is better things to do in life.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any advice for anyone who, say, if they don't want to be a founder and are looking to build a successful career specifically in Web3? Do you have any advice for
Yeah.
someone on that?
Yeah. I think there's a few things that are important to do, which is Web3 is a technical space, right? So this is a technical space, and of course, some of us are technical profiles, some of us are non-technical. But at the end of the day, you are participating in technology building, and this technology building, unfortunately, in the state that is today, it's very hard to use. But that should be probably your first step. Just go and use it. Just use the hell out of it, right? Find something that you can use, and ideally, just find multiple things that you can use in Web3, because once you've used it for a couple of months, you know. I mean, if you have a good head over your shoulders, you will know what are the things to improve, what are the things to make better, right? So I always give this example that okay, you're building a great wallet, but then you don't have a customer support, or you don't have a growth mapping of your clients. You don't have a particular these support functions that we have in the SaaS business, and we dismiss them often. It's like, oh yeah, it doesn't need it, but actually that is a valuable thing that I might not be technical, but that's my specialty. I can go and make a good plan for how a user grows from like doing one transaction a day to millions of dollars, or their maximum transactions. And so by trying these solutions as a first step, we would really identify what are the areas that click with you. It's like, okay, I tried 10 solutions and I think actually customer support is one thing that needs to be improved. Or I tried 10 solutions and I believe that writing more digestible content for users is the thing that needs to be done. Or you're technical, so you try them and then you discover bugs and you know how to fix those. And so
Yeah.
trying is the first step. The other thing as well is that people often struggle a bit with unstable jobs, right? The challenge in Web3 is that there is no job that is stable. Like I've seen in even companies like ConsenSys and Polygon, like cuts happen. You think everything is going well, and then hey, you say bye-bye to 15, 20% of your colleagues. So let alone actually joining startups with a runway of only 6 months or 12 months. It's like, oh, this is not stable. You guys will not have money in 6 months or 12 months. Well, that's actually the risk to take in Web3. But then obviously, if you really go into a team and you're doing a great job and you're doing your contribution and participation in the community. I mean, we're fortunate that we have these conferences happening almost every week somewhere in the world, and so you will see a subset of the Web3 community here and there. Just be engaged, go out, make connections, be proud of your work, and explain what you're doing, even in a smaller project. And you'll discover that compared to, I don't know, maybe your banking days or your SaaS days, it's a much smaller circle in Web3. So it's easier to get access to advice. It's easier to get access to opportunities, and then maybe find a better fit. I'm not saying to job hop, but kind of like evolve in your career and learn about other places where it could be better for you and you could be more successful. Um, those are the main things, really. Just it's technology that is available today, so go and try it. Then also, it's a community that is very accessible, and so go and talk to as many, learn about. Don't be pushy. Don't have an agenda. It's like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's more of a sharing common interest, common topics, and people would think like I still get, like, for example, pings about, hey, we are a team building this one, can you recommend somebody who does this? And then immediately what comes to my mind, I don't have, of course, a Rolodex of people who are doing this, but it comes to my mind is the person that I spoke to about that field, or I spoke to about that particular domain, and I was like, yeah, this person or that person. So I think from a career perspective, if you're doing things the right way and willing to take a bit of risk, as I said, then it could be a good space to access and to stay in. I'm not saying that it's for everybody as well. It has its own shortcomings as a space, but it's a much more manageable. If you are genuinely interested about the space, it's much more manageable than finding a job in, I don't know, banking or software that is exciting to you.
Definitely. And I definitely think it's a space that you can find really interesting problems that you genuinely are interested in solving as well. There's so much content out there about every individual project and what's being built. A lot of things are being built in the open, or there's communities around them where everyone's talking about it on a daily basis. Like, you can genuinely find stuff that you really want to solve, um, which is quite it's quite a cool place to be if you can, when you can do that. Um, you think about like Web 2 and things like this. There's so many companies, so many projects, but you don't really necessarily know what a lot of them are like building in the background, or the work that's going on. You don't get access to the team. You can't ask questions to the teams and this kind of stuff. Whereas in Web3 you can, which
Yeah,
I found interesting.
the fact is, as a Web3 project, the first thing you do is open a Discord, right? So that opens a channel of communication right away. As a founder, I
Yeah.
think the very first thing is to make social presence. I mean, I know that some teams are anonymized, which is fine, but they still socially present. You still can talk to them even as an anonymous person on Discord or
Mm.
Twitter. And so I think that kind of desire to connect and interact with either your clients or other talent in your space to exchange ideas makes it much more accessible for a person who wants to enter the domain as an employee. So as long as you're willing to learn and interact, usually you'll find something that clicks with you and that will make you really passionate. And it's really a passion project. Like the whole of Web3 is a passion project. You could, if you're pursuing money, careers in Web2 probably pay more. If you're pursuing stability, they're probably more stable. If you're pursuing social validation, like in Thanksgiving parties and family gatherings, probably telling them that you work for IBM is much better than telling them you work for a crypto company. Um, and
Yeah.
so the reason why we do this, it's really kind of a passionate field where, when you talk about decentralization, when you talk about like, changing the world or creating a new financial system or even a new kind of trust system and different use cases, these are human, challenges that we are trying to solve using technology. And so, yeah, if you explore it, I think you'll find something that would really excite you. And then I believe that most people, when they're excited about something, they can really excel at it and become very convincing on why they should be contributing to that particular space.
Absolutely. Is there anything about the industry that you'd love people to be aware of before they do join?
This is recorded, right? So I cannot
Yeah.
say. I think it's hopefully temporary properties of the industry. The fact that the sample size is very small, right? So if you look at the number of people in this industry, it's smaller than other industries. And so what that makes is that actually makes concentration of certain characteristics or properties. And for instance, um, it's a very engineering heavy community, right? So the profile of people you're talking to are, I joke, so usually either actually an IT engineer or a TradFi banker. These are the two people that you have in crypto. And so obviously that could be a challenge for somebody who is a bit more, different from a background point of view. The other thing as well is that it's full of course, monetary gain pursuit, which leads to, scammers, shortcut takers, etc. Um, I do believe actually that because we've been around for a couple of years as an industry, now that concept of known reputable person or known scammer is starting to establish itself. Whereas at the beginning, it's like it was such short, like you don't know. Um, and so that aspect, the fact that I think if you're building a startup in Web2, it's going to be a while until it becomes a liquid asset, and then you can maybe take some stock options and or whatever. Versus on crypto, you can tomorrow make it a liquid business essentially, and you can trade whether the token or the action of that business. It really creates that short-term versus long-term vision, and you might end up in the wrong space or with the wrong team or the wrong project. So these are things to be wary of. Um, yeah, and I believe also like the remote aspect of it. Like I almost don't know any crypto company. I mean, I'm sure they exist, but most of the crypto projects right now are remote workers. Some of them are in the same city, which is great. Some are a bit distributed in around the world. So that's actually a special environment as well for somebody to operate in. Not everybody is good and comfortable with remote work. Um, those would be the main thing. The fact that it's a very concentrated society in terms of like profiles and where do people comes from. The aspect that instant access to monetary reward or incentives can make people act in untrusty way. And then the last bit is the remote work really, which is I'm heading over to tomorrow to GM Vietnam, which is a conference in Vietnam. I'll be seeing a lot of friends. I'm very excited, and I'm sure I'm going to be at the highest of my morale. And then you would go into a couple of weeks of nothing, right? You're working from your from your base, and so knowing how to keep that energy and excitement over a long period of times until the next gathering is actually kind of a um, how to say a psychology hack that you have to learn if you work in this space.
Definitely. I think that's where the community side of it comes in as well. I think that's why it's so important. If you're part of
Yeah.
various different community groups and this kind of things, then at least you can have those chats with people who are in a similar position. Because I say, if I try to talk to any friends and say, yeah, you know what, I'm working in Web3 crypto, like this is the state of the industry, like this is making me a little bit nervous about this part for whatever reason. It's very different to what they would necessarily worry or talk about, for example.
Mm,
So actually having those
mm.
community groups when you are working relatively solo, of like-minded people, I think is super handy.
Yeah, that's how I justify how much time I'm spending on Telegram and Twitter. Just that's my support group
I'm
essentially.
networking.
Yeah, networking. It's really a support group to just kind of yeah, keep the motivation going, and obviously it's quite an open space as we discussed, so you can get really to know what people are working on, and that inspires you. Like today, we had a call with a particular project. She's a friend, spoken to her since actually last year. So we caught up on what they're building and so on. And just like it sparks inspiration. It's like, oh, this is good. Let's see how we can fit it into our project. Let's see how we can collaborate on these things. So I think that kind of constant interaction with the community, even if you are remote, is quite important for a healthy work environment and for, of course, good innovation.
Yeah, completely agree. And if someone is listening to this and thinking, you know what, I want to become a successful head of business development within the Web3 space specifically, any advice that you could give them on, key traits or approach or whatever it might be? Like, how do you become really successful at that in Web3?
I think there is two types, to be honest. Like there is, for example, a head of BD or head of growth within a project. So often that's kind of an individual contributor role. So you are really mastering what that project is doing, and you have certain techniques in terms of like seeking growth or establishing partnerships. You may have a network of people that you know, or you might not have it, which is fine. You can always get it, as I said, through easy access, as long as you have a good value to bring to people. So that's one particular role, which is an individual contributor, and then it's thinking about it not as a sales role, but it's more about like business development. You have something that you want to validate. Um, One trick is I always actually give value before I take one. So I always, if somebody, for example, I speak to them and they need a particular solution for something. It doesn't matter if it's coming from me or from another protocol. I will make those introductions. I'll let people actually connect with other people. That kind of multiplies the effect. And so be valuable, find things that are helping other people, and then obviously if you are strategizing enough, then you know that down the way it will lead to maybe you becoming in useful as well. So it creates a two-way collaboration. Um, so that's easier. Now, in a big organization, let's say as Polygon or other protocols, a head of business development becomes a bit more of a strategic role. So you have actually very smart people who are executing within country or within a vertical. And then what you're doing is like you're looking at that space, whether it's geographic space or kind of an industry space, and you try and actually to strategize and, all right, what's happening, what's going on, okay, what is Optimism doing? Is Arbitrum doing? Who's actually leading the RWA narrative? Who's reading the gaming one? And what can I do to position myself? Is it worth it for me to position myself in that space? And so a lot of actually hypotheses that you will be making, and then obviously you want yourself and your team to go and test it out, and then validate it quickly, and playing that long game. So two different roles. Recognize that at the beginning, and obviously you can grow from one to the other, right? So if you join a project at the beginning and it's a very successful project, then obviously that team will grow. And so you could then evolve your skills and become more on the strategy level versus you can say, you know what, I don't want to, I want to stay at what I'm doing. I'm really good at this. I enjoy it. So I'm going to continue, which is absolutely fine as well. And you probably have a better life that way. So yeah, those are the general tips really for it.
No, that's great. Yeah, I really like the part of giving value before expecting to receive any. To be honest, that's one of the main things and one of the main my main ethos really from launching my agency. I just wanted to focus on adding as much value as possible, helping as many people as possible, and then
Yeah.
letting everything else kind of look after itself. And I feel like
It
if
comes it comes
you're
naturally,
going with,
right? After that.
yeah, definitely. And I think if you go into these types of roles with the wrong intentions, it can be quite clear to people really that you're just trying to kind of take, and you're not really helping in any way. It's very, very apparent when
Yeah.
that happens.
Agree.
Um, so so Maureen, so obviously you said some brilliant advice today. A lot of tips, a lot of advice. It's great to listen to your journey. One question I always like to ask everyone: knowing what you know now about business development, about sales, about leadership, about founding a business, if you could go back to the start of your career, what advice would you have for your younger self just starting out?
Um, I don't know. I wouldn't do it any different. So just like, it has been great. um, no, I think actually just to it's a very difficult question. I would say actually to always pursue what really entertains you the most. Obviously, it depends on where you are in your life and the stage. I am in my late 30s right now, and so it's always like, did I have enough fun doing what I was doing? And so
Mhm.
it's not so much about the role, it's not so much about the pay, it's not so much about the nature of the job you're doing, whether it's a developer or sales or whatever it is. I think maximizing that enjoyment part is what matters the most. At the beginning of your career, I remember like my first salaries were like miserable, and then every year you get like that little bit of bump. It's like, oh wow, I'm making it, and then you're pursuing essentially a comfortable lifestyle to a certain point. And I think that's vary from one person to the other, of course, depending on what you want to do in life. But then you quickly realize that it's not very important, and that you can, I'm exaggerating here, but you can live off $1,000 as well as you can live off $10,000. Like it's, you just expand into that monetary gain. And so at one point in your career, you realize that, okay, pursuing maybe the monetary gain is not the most important thing, unless, of course, it's $1 billion. That's different. But if it's a salary, it's a
Yeah.
salary, right? And so, yeah, maximizing the fun element, maximizing the satisfaction. Like, am I satisfied with what I'm doing? And I believe actually most of my career I did follow that. Maybe I waited a bit too long in certain like transitions than I should. So I would have probably said make it faster. But then overall, as long as you are pursuing that, okay, is this fun for me? Am I having, enjoying what I'm doing? Am I feeling fulfilled? If not, then just take a risk. Take a risk and switch to something else. And think of yourself as this adaptable person, and you will find a lot of things to do rather than just feeling confined. It's like, oh, the only thing I do is how to do this one thing, so it's impossible for me to do that or that. Actually, yeah, I think it's a self-discovery journey. So take a risk and then find always something slightly different, slightly more to do. And then if you enjoy it, continue doing it. If you don't, just switch to something else.
I like that. It's good advice. Well,
Absolutely. I'll
Marin,
try to tell it to my kids.
well, Marin, thank you very much for taking the time to have a conversation today. Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I'm gonna enjoy listening back to this and taking some notes and trying to implement some of this myself. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time.
I'll, Yeah, I would love to thank you as well, Jack. I mean, these opportunities, the main reason why I love doing this is also because it makes you learn about yourself, right? So this was kind of like a free shrink session. So I would enjoy also listening to it back, and it's like,
You
oh,
said it was free.
there's nothing free in life, but you don't start with that. But yeah, so the idea is really that it's a good chat to have these kind of conversations, whether it's actually recorded or even with a friend, and that helps you really realize a few things that maybe you took for granted. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, I'm hopefully to see it and recording, and then also to catch up with you very soon.
Sounds great. Well, perfect. Well, thank you very much, and I'll chat to you soon.
Thanks.